G'day, welcome back to this channel. Welcome to the War Room, where I'm busy devising strategies, plans to try and mitigate the effects of this remote ID rule that currently is about to descend on the USA. Now, we must make some obvious observations. The remote rule exists. It's not going to go away. It's going to be enforced as of the 16th of September. Everybody will have to have either built-in standard remote ID or a broadcast module on any craft that weighs over 250 grams or is being used for Part 107 operations. So yeah, that's something we cannot change. It's too late to say, let's go in and change the remote ID, let's get it thrown out, because it's not going to happen. The time to do that was when registration was first mooted, and I said, don't register. That was the only chance we had to avoid finding ourselves in the situation we're now in. But too many people just said, it's all right, it's $5, doesn't matter. So that boat has long sailed. So now we're going to take some serious looks at what can we do? What can we do to ease the burden on the hobby, to protect the hobby from what really is annihilation, an extinction level event when the full network remote ID comes into effect, because that is the end game. And the final rule for remote ID uses the phrase "at this time" prolifically throughout the document. Everywhere it's splattered. It's like a shotgun. At this time, at this time. So they say there will be no network component of remote ID at this time, which is obviously saying we're going to do it as soon as we can. And the reason that there is no network component of remote ID is not because 54,000 people provided submissions that said we don't want it. It's because the technology partners that would be required to provide the infrastructure, the ubiquitous internet coverage, said we can't do that yet. So the FAA simply said, okay, well, we'll just use broadcast until you can do it. And when you can provide us with nationwide internet coverage, then we will implement the network remote ID just as we proposed in our NPRM. So all those people who are fooling themselves into thinking that those submissions made a difference, no, they didn't. The only submissions that made a difference were the ones from the technology providers who said we can't do it. That's the only ones that counted. The rest of it, just an illusion. Now, I've been doing this, dealing with bureaucrats and rule makers for half a century, engaged in battles very similar to this, and I've learned a lot of stuff. One of the things I've learned is that the system that we're invited to use, that the submission system and the democratic system, it is designed by the very same people that we're fighting against. So you don't really think that the government is going to create a system which really empowers people to fight back against the things that they propose, do you? No, the system is cunningly and cleverly designed to give the illusion that you can have some effect, that you can foment change through your actions whilst basically protecting against any of that happening. That is just a fact, just a reality of life. I know that we've had people like the FPV Freedom Coalition and the AMA working in the system to try and get change, and I've seen it, I've predicted it, and it's happening. What happens is the FAA, the rule makers say, yes, come and talk to us. Or they go, yeah, that sounds great. This is fantastic. Oh, yeah. And then they hand out little morsels. Oh, you can do this. But ultimately, nothing changes. When it comes to the end of the day, they do what they want to do. All they do is just placate you by giving you tiny morsels, and then they say, okay, we're doing this. And all your work has been for nothing. And that's what's proven to be the case. I mean, look at it. We are now 3 months, 3 short months from the second phase of remote ID being implemented. And even, as far as I'm aware, the AMA headquarters at Muncie, Indiana hasn't been declared a FRIA. In fact, I'm going to do a separate video on how I believe the FAA is going to handle this FRIA issue, and it is very, very bad news for AMA members. Absolutely tragic. I could be wrong, but I'm going to do another crystal ball prediction video, because I think at the end of the day, probably by the end of the year, the FAA is going to turn around and say, you guys don't need FRIAs. You don't need them. That's my prediction, but I'll do a whole video on it because it'll be enlightening. And if you're an AMA member, you do not want to miss that video, because if it's true, you're going to be so pissed off. Now, we need to be very clever with our strategies. Too many, I've seen that recently, everybody's gone off half-cocked. They don't understand how it works. They won't listen to people like myself who do understand how it works, and they have weakened our case beyond recovery. What am I talking about? Letter writing campaign. I said this will not work. Writing a letter campaign to raise the limit from 250 to 1 kilo. It will not work. Do not write to your senators and your representatives. It is the wrong thing to do, because what does it do? Well, before that letter writing campaign, a whole bunch of politicians probably looked at the numbers and said, well, there's nearly 1 million people fly these drones. And that's a lot of people. There's a lot of votes in that audience, these people flying drones. Maybe we should listen to what they say. But after we did that letter writing campaign, each senator or representative probably got a couple of hundred emails. And throughout the entire 310 million people in the USA, I would suspect that it was only a 4-digit number that ended up actually sending emails to their representatives. So as a percentage of the voting population, it doesn't count for nothing. The politicians are saying, there's such a small number of people concerned about this. Why should we care? I don't care if I lose 100 votes at the next election. There's no skin off my nose, so I'm just going to ignore these people. And because we don't have the money to buy influence through lobbying, we are powerless. We've shown our hand. The politicians may have thought, we should pay attention because there's a million of them. Now they're saying, even when they tried, they could only raise a few hundred letters, emails in our state. We don't give a damn. So we have just shot ourselves in the foot. You never do letter writing campaigns or online petitions or anything where you require a show of numbers unless you are absolutely sure you have the numbers. It was like the protest outside of the FAA headquarters. We had how many people turned up? Out of the entire United States, how many people actually cared enough to go along and hold a placard? The people in the FAA were looking out the window going, if this is all we've got to worry about, let's just go and continue eating our biscuits and drinking our coffee. That's what they would have said, because you show your weakness unless you can really, really guarantee having the numbers. And we just do not have enough in the community to show those numbers. We should never have used those strategies. They have backfired enormously, disempowered us. No one in authority, no one in the regulator, no one in the bureaucracy, no one in the political circle cares a jot about us. We are so small in number and so powerless. And we demonstrated that several times because we didn't listen to people who have been through this before and know that this doesn't work because they've tried it and they've watched others do it and they've seen the outcome. It's a great idea. It's really good, feel good. Oh, look what we're doing. Look, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So, but that's history. That's been done. We can't change that. We need to look forward. What can we do? Well, as I said, we need to set realistic goals for what we're going to try and achieve in our actions as we move forward. Now, getting rid of the remote ID rule, not going to happen in the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. Not going to happen. It's already there. So how do we get enough change that it becomes practical to continue enjoying the hobby as we have done in the past, which means making sure we don't have to fit our stuff with remote ID and deal with all the issues associated with that. Well, I believe that 1 kg limit thing is really, really good. It's a really good idea. Most of us would be able to have a lot of fun without having to fit remote ID if there was a 1 kg threshold for registration and for remote ID. That would make sense because really most of these drone rules are on the illusion that we're all flying 55-pound craft that pose an immense threat and danger to the public, which is obviously patently untrue. So what we need to do is apply pressure to have that change. Now, it's no good talking to your politicians because they don't understand anything, and they're the ones who have directed the FAA to do this. But they have directed them in very broad terms. We need remote ID. The FAA has come along and said, well, we'll set the threshold at 250. So we need to talk to the FAA. They set, as far as I'm aware, they set that threshold so they can change that threshold. Politicians have nothing to do with it. So writing to your politician, it was a waste of time and just showed our hand. We need to focus on making sure the FAA understands what we're doing and that they change that limit. Now, we're not going to get there by having Dave Messina from the FPV Freedom Coalition sit in a room and chat with some FAA people who will tell him what he wants to hear and then do what they want to do. We need to force their hand. And I've been saying, I'm an old militant. Sometimes you just have to be a militant. Sometimes no amount of currying favour and greasing palms and tugging forelocks will have any effect. No amount of being nice has an effect. These people, they don't care. So we have to force their hands. We have to make it uncomfortable for them not to make this change. And that's where, so we've set our goal. I believe, well, tell me if I'm wrong, go down to my gentleman parts where the comments are and leave your suggestions as to what we should be trying to achieve as we move forward. I believe the achievement should be to have that set to 1 kg. So we can fly freestyle, we can fly racing drones, we can fly, foamies in the park without all this burden. And it preserves a safe space for the hobby to operate in. So we've got to work out how we achieve that now. What are the strategies? What are we going to bring to bear? How are we going to apply this pressure to the FAA and force them to make this change? A change they don't want to make, but a change we should create enough pressure that they have to make it. They have no choice but to make it. It's the only way we're going to get the change. We must force their hand. So I've been developing strategies. Now, obviously one is non-compliance. And a lot of people are saying, oh, I'm not going to comply. And that is one route. If there's massive non-compliance, then the FAA will have to explain to their bosses why this remote ID isn't working. The problem is, and this is the problem that will kill non-compliance, it is that the politicians believe there are now nearly 1 million drone flies. And if we know what our numbers are, at the best, 1,000 maybe is all we'll get in non-compliance. If 1,000 out of 1 million, 0.1% of are non-compliant, that probably gets pretty good. That's 99.9% compliance. That's good enough for us. So we won't you won't foment any change through non-compliance because it's only 0.1% of us will be non-compliant. Everyone else will just follow the rules. That's what they'll do. That's the way people are. No one cares enough. So we have to come up with other ways of doing it. And I have some plans. I'm not going to disclose those plans now because one of the secrets of a good plan in many cases is the element of surprise. The FAA will not, and the parties involved in this will not have the remotest idea of what I'm going to do, what I'm going to suggest, where I'm going to come from, who I'm going to target with this particular strategy. It will come out of left field and they'll all be going, what the hell happened there? And if they're not prepared for what's coming, they don't have a strategy for managing it. You catch them on the back foot, that's when they're at their weakest. Then you can start making demands and say, come on, you need to do this. So that's what I'm planning now. I've got several strategies, and because non-compliance is not a strategy for everybody. You may be, a guy, you've got a wife, you've got children, you've got a car, you've got a house, you've got payments to make. Can you really afford for the FAA to come along and slap you with a $100,000 fine because they decided to make an example of you to stop other people from being non-compliant? You don't want to take that risk. You shouldn't take that risk. This is only a hobby. There are more important things. Your family is more important. Your own financial well-being is more important than a hobby. This is a pastime. Other things are essential. This is a luxury. It may be a passion, but it's still just a luxury. So you've got to prioritize. That's why I say to people, if you want to support me on Patreon, I would really appreciate it. If you want to be a channel member, I'd appreciate it. If you want to click and donate some money, I'd appreciate it. But don't do it unless you've paid your own bills and you're taking care of your family and you're putting some aside for the future. Don't spend money you can't afford supporting me because I'm only here in a supporting role for the hobby, and the hobby is luxury. We can all live without it, but you can't live without a house. You can't live without medical insurance. So yeah, those are the things. Get your priorities right. So I will be continuing to devise these strategies. I'd like to form a bit of a working group with people we can trust because, as I say, we don't want this leaking out to the parties, so we want to catch them completely off guard. Form a working group, do some conferencing, refine these ideas, refine the strategies. I've got plenty of ideas, but one thing I've learned over many years is I'm not always right. My perspective is obviously from one direction. Other people have other inputs. Many hands make light work, and you need as many perspectives as you can because there's some things I won't be thinking of, other people will be thinking of. And also, I'm not in the USA. I'm not totally au fait with the culture and the way people look at things, and we've got to get all things perfectly right. So I need all the input I can get to make sure we do this. We get one chance to make this impression. We've got to do it right. So that's where I'm coming from now. I want people to, voice their support if they want to, and we'll get this thing moving along. It's not going to happen overnight. We've got 3 months to get really prepared and to roll this out. And I'm looking at a time frame of probably 3 months to the point where we're ready to say go on this. And timing is also critical. So we're going to get this dead right. One chance. Let's do it properly. Let's not go off half-cocked like everybody has done in the lead up to this. So there you go. Thank you. Now, obviously, I'm not making money while I'm doing this. I'm not making videos. I've got one video in the can here. This is a flight video. It'll be going up shortly. But this is taking all of my time. This and the ADSBL, I'm taking all my time at the moment. None of this generates revenue. So if you do want to support me, go for it. I will not say no. But as I said before, don't give me money you can't afford. Don't, look after your family and yourselves first. So stay tuned. There will be a series of videos keeping you all up to date on what I think is doing. A video on what I think the FAA is going to do with the AMA that will really piss them off. And I hope I'm wrong, but I fear I may not be wrong. So stay tuned. If you're not a subscriber, you need to subscribe or you could miss all this juicy stuff. In the meantime, thank you for watching. If you're a supporter, I appreciate it. You are a hero. And I will now get back to work many hours before the sun goes down. So I've got a lot to do, not a lot of time to do it. I will try and come back to you within the next few days with an update. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Overregulation is like a tumor. It's killing our hobby. It must be terminated. Now!